All right. Hey, y'all. I'm Jennifer Purcell with Spark Flash Fiction. And tonight I'm talking to Lakeisha Heeringa, right?
Hmm.
About her story, The High Cost of Liberty, from our latest issue, Love is a Battlefield. So I'm going to read her bio real quick to introduce her, and then we're going to get into it. All right. Lakeisha is a rural Midwest author of Americana suspense. Thanks to a childhood filled with her dad's adventure stories and her mom's history focused homeschool program, Lakeisha began writing melodramatic historical fiction at a young age. Since then, she has cut back on the melodrama but retained her love of hero stories, adding a dash of suspense and high stakes to every story she writes. Lakeisha is a member of the ACFW and serves on the board of her local chapter. She is an alumna of the Riders Police Academy, a three-time finalist in the ACFW Virginia Crown Awards, and is on the long road towards publication of her debut novel. When not writing, Lakeisha is very active in music, serving as a concert master, church musician, middle school music teacher, and private music teacher. Any non existent spare time is filled with hunting, fishing, hiking, baking, and of course, reading. So let's start with my favorite question. Tell me the inspiration behind the high cost of liberty.
I knew I wanted, when I saw the theme, I knew I wanted to do something with the Revolutionary War because last year I was out to Boston for 2 days and I absolutely loved it. I got to go to the Boston Tea Party and throw tea in the harbor. I got to do the Freedom Trail, which I loved. I grew up watching Johnny Tremaine over and over and over again. And so it was so cool to see the places that I had watched on the screen in real life. And the second day I went to Lexington and Concord. So yes, when I saw the theme, I knew it had to be Revolutionary War, and I just had to come up with an idea. And I like to twist things, and the expectation is the girl's going to fall in love with a good guy. But what if it was the bad guy? And that's kind of where things went from there.
I love that. And that kind of answers my next question because the last time that you wrote for us, you wrote a story set in the Wild West
Mm-hmm.
that was really good. So it did make me kind of curious of why you decided to do the Revolutionary period instead. But
And
I
this
think
one's
you did.
completely different because there's no snark in there. I was
well, I
actually dead serious.
Well, I like how you showed your range with that. I mean, I don't know if you realize this, Lakeisha, but that shows that you're a really good writer, that you could write like these two different stories that fit their time so well and what was going on in the story so well. It was fabulous. I think it helped you go into Boston and getting to throw tea in the harbor. I'm kind of
Yes.
jealous now.
I highly recommend the Boston Tea Party Museum. That was so cool. Freedom Trail, definitely love it. However, do not climb the Bunker Hill Monument. It is not worth it. It's like
Okay.
294 steps, and there's no airflow movement at the top because the windows are plexiglassed over. And yeah, the view isn't even that spectacular. So stay on the ground. My friend and I, we had hiked the Freedom Trail. We were
Uh-huh.
about out of water. And then we're like, oh, yeah, we'll do Bunker Hill. So we go all the way up to the
Oh,
top.
no.
My legs were like jelly by the time I got back down. And then we had to find water. And I'm too cheap to walk someplace and buy it. So we're like looking for a bubbler, which was, we finally found one in the museum for the USS Constitution. It tasted like chlorine, but it was water.
Uh, do I suspect that that might end up in a story at some point with a heroine that walks a far distance for water? Because your description was great, and I feel like you should use it.
I don't know.
So tell me, you obviously love historical time periods. I'm curious, what era is your favorite?
It probably is the Wild West.
Mhm.
That comes from the John Wayne movies I watched as a kid, growing up reading the Little House on the Prairie books. But anything from, I'd say, French and Indian War all the way up to around the Gilded Age, I would say that's the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
Anything past World War II, you're not going to find me writing anywhere there, I don't think.
I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. But I think we talked about this last time about your love for Bonanza and how that kind of influenced your writing a little bit. But
Gunsmoke. I watched a little bit of Bonanza. It was more Gunsmoke.
You're right. I said the wrong name. My mom would be like completely horrified at me. But I've never watched. Did you say it was John Tremaine that got you interested in the Revolution?
Yeah. It's an old Walt Disney. Hal Steinmaster or something like that was the guy that starred in it. It's not 100% based on the book. I watched the movie all the time when I was little, then tried reading the book, and I was horrified because the book was nothing like the movie. So I'm like, close that book.
You know, that kind of happened to me with Gone with the Wind because I grew up watching the movie and I picked up the book and it's like the size of a dictionary. And I was like determined I was going to finish this book, but there were like characters that weren't in the movie and like things were like so different. And I was like, this is why you read the book before the movie.
Right.
Transit. But anyway, so speaking of books, tell me, Lakeisha, I know you don't have a lot of spare time, but you do try to read as much as possible in spare time. So tell me, is there anything that you've read recently that you enjoyed that you want to tell us about?
I've got 3 books that I've read so far this year that are already contenders for my top 5 overall for 2025.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The Burning of Rosemont Abbey by Naomi Stevens. That's kind of like Agatha Christie, 1950s in Great Britain. It's like Agatha Christie meets Nancy Drew. I adored that book. It was so good. Then Written in Secret by Crystal Cottle. That one, very sweet romance. Really like that one. And I love the mystery. There is a dime novelist whose crimes are now coming to life. And so she deals with a lot of guilt because she wrote these books to prove a point, and now someone is proving the point, literally. So that one was really good. And then The Tempest at Annabelle's Lighthouse by Jamie Jo Wright. That one was good. And the romance surprised me. I did not see it coming how she was going to do that. So that one was very good.
Yeah, I have to agree. She had a lot of surprises in that book.
I was actually almost scared reading that one, which is saying something.
To me, those are like the perfect books to read late at night because like you're a little spooked out, but you know like there's a reasonable and rational explanation coming. And you're like, if I could just get to the explanation, I will be able to sleep tonight.
And then I finished the book and it was, I don't know, 11, 12 o'clock at night. And then I laid awake for a while because it was so good.
That quintessential book hangover. Love it. All right, let's talk about music for a second because you are obviously heavily involved in the music world. And so I'm just curious, does music affect your writing in any way?
In the brainstorming process, yes. If I have the right music that I'm listening to, it can just spark ideas like that. I was actually listening to some ABBA 1970s disco music. And The Winner Takes It All came on. And I was doing dishes at the moment and I just stopped right there at the sink because all of a sudden I was hit with a story idea just off of that song. So that was the latest, greatest one. So
I love that. So I'm curious though, are you able to listen to music as you write, or because you're around music so much, do you just need that dead silence?
I get distracted. I'll start thinking about the music and analyzing it or using it as an excuse to stare off into space. So
I can understand that. I definitely can understand that. So tell me, because I'm nosy and curious, what kind of instruments can you play? Because I'm assuming it's more than one.
I started violin lessons when I was 6, so I'm very proficient on violin. Piano, I played by ear ever since I was little, and then I ended up taking piano lessons. I was self-taught, but I ran out of music, And my sister took piano lessons and she kept bringing home music from her piano teacher. So I'm like, oh, I didn't want a teacher telling me what to do, but I wanted music really bad. So then I took piano lessons. So those are my two primary. I also play organ, church musician. And then with teaching middle school music, it's like, okay, well, I guess let's watch YouTube and learn how to play flute. Oh, snare drum. Yep, I can figure that out. Trumpet. But yeah, most any percussion instrument I can figure out. But the main ones are piano, violin, organ, viola, also ukulele. I bought a mandolin last summer. In my spare time, I'll learn that.
That is amazing. That is incredible. I'm highly impressed now. Okay, let's go to another topic because like I said, I'm being nosy here, but I want to hear about this hunting and this fishing because, like, look, I'm a Southern girl. I live in the country. I don't hunt and I don't fish, and I have people who do, but it's just like not my thing. But when you write historical romance, I feel like probably it helps to at least know like a little bit about it. Mm-hmm. So, tell me a little bit about how you learned to hunt and fish and if it influences your writing any.
It does influence my writing. I wouldn't say that there's anything, well, maybe a little bit on the page so far. So my dad, big hunting family, so it was inevitable. I would bring books up into the tree stand when I was little, and now I have sat in the tree stand and plotted stories. I've done that before. Last fall, I went bear hunting up north, and that was in off the grid, living out of a tent, north woods for 8 to 10 days, and that was phenomenal. And that will all that kind of experience will make their way into a story someday, probably some frontier story. Fishing, yeah, I've always been fishing. That might show up in a story someday. So yeah, I guess it's probably influenced more of my writing and ideas than I realize.
Yeah.
The other thing that I like, and this also ties into the hiking, is I love history so much. And obviously, I can't time travel back to it. But when you're in nature and all you hear is nature and all you see is nature, it's no different than the 1700s.
Yeah.
So that's my time traveling.
Yeah, that's a really good point because that's one of the few things that we have in common with the people back then because they did not have cell phones or YouTube or television to suck away their time and doom scrolling. But
right.
All right, so tell me a little bit. I think we talked about this last time, but just in case someone is new and they're watching this for the first time, tell me a little bit about your writing process, especially since you only have like so much time in order to get your writing done. So tell me what that looks like.
I am a plotter, reformed pantser, now plotter. So I'm in the plotting process right now. In the summer, I will pedal to the metal, write as much as I possibly can because during the school year, it's not really going to happen. So I'll outline. The hardest part is I write suspense and mystery. So making sure I have all my ducks in a row, know exactly when to drop the clues in, know when to put in red herrings, try to think like the reader so I can get out ahead of them. So that's the hard part. And normally that will go right up through the editing process as I'm sitting there trying to figure out where I dropped a clue and any unintentional clues that I might have put in there. So yeah, I'll outline first and then I'll work up a draft as best as I can. And then during the school year, then I'll edit as I have time. And yeah, that's about it. And there's also proposal.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, but that sounds nice and streamlined. It sounds like you've almost got it down to a science.
Summer's too short, though. That's the problem. If I take too long, it's a 2-summer process to just write up one book.
I hear you. Summer is way, way, way too short. But I'm also curious because I watch my nieces and nephews, and I work a lot with kids at church. And I have to say, sometimes kids can give you some good ideas without even meaning to. And so I'm curious, when you're at school or you're teaching these kids, do they ever say or do something where you're like, wait a minute, let me go, and then you have to like go jot it down in your notebook or something?
It hasn't happened with the school kids. I have when I need like a name to throw in there. I think there was one year I went through the entire third grade class and they all ended up in a story. So I've done that. There's been a couple of kids where I'm like, you are one of my characters when they were younger, just by the way that they act.
Oh.
But back when I was in college, I worked at a sweet corn farm, and the help was almost all teenage boys. And I had piles of notes from the things they said and did. And some of those did wind up in stories because it was sometimes just too dumb.
Oh man, I love that. Okay, so last question that I have for you is since you love music so much, one of the things I enjoy doing when I'm working on a story is to go back and be like, okay, what kind of music would my characters hear? And
Mm-hmm.
what would they know? And what would be something that they would be likely to play? And sometimes I listen to that when I'm trying to brainstorm. So I'm curious, is there any I'm trying to think of the right word for this because I know there are different periods in music, but is there anything more classical that your characters might have listened to that you actually love to listen to on your own time?
In the High Cost of Liberty, they would have listened to the classical era music, of which I am not a fan. I prefer romantic era and impressionist. So there's another character in another book that gets all of that. Um, but one thing that is fascinating, and I've taught this to my middle school students,
Mhm.
is Ben Franklin, obviously famous guy from American Revolution, famous inventor. He invented the glass harmonica. And it's a series of wine glasses that are nestled in each other, and it's almost like an old-fashioned sewing machine where you have a treadle, so they're all spinning, and then you wet your fingers and then you place your fingers on there, and it produces this really eerie sound. If you just like Google glass harmonica, you're going to find videos of this. So that would have taken place late 1700s. The glass harmonica became instantly popular. Mozart wrote music for it, Beethoven wrote music for it, but then it got a bad reputation. People started claiming that it was summoning the spirits of the dead because it sounded so eerie.
Oh,
Um, People would get headaches. They claimed they were hallucinating. Performers would get sick. And there was even at one performance where someone in the audience died. So they blamed the glass harmonica for it. And it started becoming banned. So one thing that they have found out is the early glass harmonicas did use lead paint. So that could account for the performers falling ill, because technically, yes, you're supposed to dip your hand in water and then run it on the cups, but I'm sure there's a lot of that going on.
yeah.
So it's possible my characters in the High Cost of Liberty would have heard a glass harmonica. I know. I'm trying to think what book it was that I read. There's a Revolutionary War book that I read at one point. I think it might have been by Newt Gingrich. Kind of like the Jeff Shara type Revolutionary War books, and I believe he referenced the glass harmonica in one of them. I think it might have been his Valley Forge book. So yeah, that would have been around at that time.
So I'm trying to imagine the sound. Is it similar to, I don't know if you've seen Miss Congeniality, but when she's going
Mhm.
to play the water glasses at the talent show, like I'm just trying to figure out if
That
that's.
probably would have been the sound, because that was initially what it was, is you would just wet wine glasses, and then Ben Franklin streamlined it into the actual instrument. So, but yeah, if you just Google it, I know there's quite a few videos of it. They're not very popular. You're most likely to see one in a museum. But yeah, glass harmonica, called the world's deadliest instrument.
That is the coolest little tidbit. That's one of the things I love about historical romance is they have like these weird little tidbits that you
Mm-hmm.
never would have learned in history class.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know where. That's like when I found out that the Mad Hatter in Alice in Wonderland. I found out
Oh
apparently back
yes,
then they used, was it mercury, and that's
yeah,
probably what
Mercury.
made him mad.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, that makes so much more sense now in context.
Uh-huh.
But
And like shoddy, the term shoddy comes from a fabric that was used during the Civil War, and it was a very cheap fabric, and it disintegrated in rain. And so that's where you get the term that something is shoddy. It's from the fabric from the Civil War.
I didn't know that.
Oh, I could go on for days with all this random stuff.
I have to say, I annoy my sister sometimes, especially since like when you write historical romance and you're like looking up like the history of words to be like, would they have used this word?
Oh,
Was
yes.
this word around? And then you find out it's not, and then you like
Mhm.
tell your random family member like, did you know that this word was? And they're like, I don't care. And you're like, no, but you don't understand like how important this is.
Right. It will throw me completely out of a book if I find a word or a phrase that would not have happened at that time. There's one author I dearly love, absolutely adore her writing, but one time she used the phrase, and it was like a French and Indian War book, cut to the chase. And that's a 1930s Hollywood term.
Oh.
And I am still so bummed because it was such a good book.
That's like I had someone who was critiquing one of my stories, and it was set in 1865, and they wanted the hero to reference the woman as doll, as like a term of endearment, and I was like, that makes me think of like mobster movies. I can't do that.
And even if that was valid, there's a thing called the Tiffany effect. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
Okay. So when we think of the name Tiffany, it's like a 1990s name, but actually it was popular in the medieval era. So you would not write a medieval story and use the name Tiffany because people would assume that you're using a modern name. But even though it was popular back then, people just don't understand that it would have been used there. They assume it's a 90s name. So you really shouldn't use Tiffany, or maybe in this case, doll. I'm not 100% sure on that one, because your reader is going to think that it's from a modern time.
I didn't know that about Tiffany. You know what? I blame that actress from Saved by the Bell. I feel like it's all her fault.
Yeah, there's sometimes I know Mom and I were talking about different romance novels and like the names. So there's been a couple books that I've read recently where the name Lachlan has popped up multiple times in like just different authors. And I was talking about it to my mom, and she said that she remembered when all the soap operas became popular, all of a sudden the romance novels were using all these soap opera hero and heroine names in these. And like they could be historical or not, but they had the soap opera cast names in there.
Well, this is probably giving away how much time I spend with children, but when I hear Lachlan, I think of Lucky from the Wiggles.
Okay.
And then I just like that ruins me for the rest of the book. And I can't. And I'm like, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to put this book aside. Oh, bless it. Well, Lakeisha, where can readers find you if they want to follow along on your writing journey?
So I have a website that's new since the last time we talked, and a newsletter. And you can find me on Facebook and Instagram. So you just look up my name. I am 100% positive I am the only Lakeisha Heeringa in the world, so you won't find someone else.
You know what? I'm a little jealous of you because one time I Googled myself and there's like a vet somewhere in the Midwest with my name, and I was like, dang it. But all right. Be sure, if you have not read Lakeisha's story yet, that you go to our issue and read The High Cost of Liberty. She also has a story in one of her past issues, and I knew this. Love in Disguise. Yes. She has a story in the Love in Disguise issue that's really good and has like a really good twist. So if you have not read that one yet, then you should definitely go and read it. I will try to include the links in the description so that you can go and find this. But anyways, thank you so much, Lakeisha, for joining me. This was so great.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching. I hope that y'all have a fantastic reading, a fantastic weekend. See, I already have books on the brain. I hope you have a fantastic weekend and that you find plenty of time to read. All right. Good night, everyone.